when you put a good-natured Midwestern short Asian kid amongst a cast of tall white people, that person on stage is automatically seen as other.
Yeah.
And when Candide is definitely an other and constantly an other in every situation that he's in that show, you get so much storytelling from the moment I turn around and look at the audience without ever needing to set that up. You just automatically know. There are so many other contexts in which a person of color can retell a tired old story just by their mere existence as a person. That maybe some people see it, maybe some won't, but it can add such incredible layers without ever having to devote any time to establishing that.
Teach people that we don't have to all dress like we live in castles and shit.
Yeah, right. And perpetuate an eternal lie, basically.
Didn't you know we're all rich, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We live in mansions and have personal assistants and interns and drivers and shit.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this.
Welcome to the show, dude. This is the
Thank you.
The quick. You can see how formal we are here. We stand on ceremony. I use the royal we like there's more than one of me, but it's just me. Yes, we here at the Quick. I don't know, marketing, I guess. Dude, I wanted to have you on the show. I've been meaning to get you on for a while because I know you. I know you, but my wife knows you really well. You guys have worked together often. My wife, Megs, for those of you who don't know. And the reviews that she has given me have been just out of sight, because she just loves you to death. And you guys have worked together on not only the stage, but on some union negotiations, which you guys are engaged in right now, which I know is so much fun.
It's actually really fun to see how the sausage is made. You give one thing, then you got to talk about it, then you get another thing, then you got to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So could you tell me a little bit about how you sort of got into this crazy circus, not only of the negotiations, but it's just the opera business in general? Because everybody has there's a lot of narratives and a lot of things that are in common, but everybody has a little bit of unique path to get here. So could you fill us in a little bit what made Andrew Stenson decide to join the circus?
So bear with me. This is a bit of a long story.
That's good. You got an hour.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm from Rochester, Minnesota, and the Upper Midwest has, much like Texas, actually has like a really, really strong choral tradition. So we all kind of grow up if you're involved in music, you're probably involved in choir at some point. There was always music in church growing up and in school, and we had really great public education system in Rochester as well. So music was a big part of it. That had always kind of been in my blood, I guess. We had an elementary school teacher. This is the most remarkable thing looking back on it. Like, this guy, Dave Nasby, just gave us all the building blocks to have any potential future in this if we wanted it. He, we would go in groups into the back and he would just drill basically ear training 1 exercises into our head, like solfege, all this harmonic progressions, scales, chromatic scales, minor, major, et cetera, et cetera. We'd be sight reading, learning basic theory, all that stuff. Basically everything you learn in your first semester of music school.
This college. Is elementary school?
Yeah. When we're like freaking 4th or 5th graders, and just like drill. And so later on, as I'm getting more into music, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all there. I already know all this. Yeah, awesome. So without even knowing it, he really made this possible for me personally. And then, I got involved in music in high school, and that really kind of brought me into my own. I was kind of like a sad, angsty, depressed kid, and then I found something that I was good at, and that really turned my life around.
Perfect for a musician, man. That's just that's on brand.
Yeah, exactly. In middle school, I'm playing guitar angrily in my parents' basement. Then some of the teachers figure out I can sing, and then I'm doing all of the music stuff in school, and that really,
So like a lot of opera singers, you didn't get your start singing like Pavarotti. You got your start grinding it out in the basement with a guitar.
Yeah, totally. There's nothing.
What was your genre back then?
We really loved Metallica.
Yeah.
and honest and Tenacious D.
Yeah.
Good guy. I really freaking love Tenacious D. So did that. so then I knew like I wanted to make music a part of my life when I went into college, and I was like, oh, I'll be a music therapist. That'll be cool. So I'll study music and psychology at the same time. Turns out I'm a really, really shitty psychology student. I don't know if I can say that on
Well, we cuss like a
the
sailor
network,
on this
but
show, man.
okay, great,
Yeah, they
awesome.
know what they're
Yeah,
getting.
so yeah, so I was a really shitty psychology student, and after like getting a C, I'm like, oh no, dropping this, done. Uh, but fortunately, I had a young, ambitious voice teacher. You might actually know her, Karen Kanakis from
Yeah, I know, Karen. We
North
went to
Texas. Yeah,
North Texas together.
yeah. Karen was my voice teacher at Luther, and she like really lit a fire under me. And she's like, have you seen an opera? And I'm like, no. And so she's like, you need to see an opera. So I went up to Minnesota Opera to see Carmen, actually, and Jay Hunter Morris was singing Don Jose. I remember that, and then I just remember it being the coolest freaking thing I had ever seen. The music was amazing. I'd never like been in like heightened drama in the theater like that before, and I remember so clearly like there was this. It was kind of a minimal production. There was this big white wall in the back with a door that Carmen would go in and out of, kind of like representing her going into her world, whatever. And so at the very end, when she's having that knockdown drag out fight with Jose, like when she's trying to escape their confrontation, she tries to go through the door, like Jose whips out his navaja and then like takes this big circle, runs up to her, cuts her throat. She slams against the wall and stays there for what feels like forever. Everyone's holding their breath. It's silent. She slowly starts sliding down this pristine white wall, leaving this giant blood streak.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
good.
oh my God, this is insane. I have to do this.
Like,
And
who
then,
directed this show? Tarantino?
yeah,
What the
yeah.
hell?
Oh, it's crazy.
If there's anything that will hook you, a scene like that will.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know,
my God.
because we talk
Yeah.
about opera like it's a drug half the time. I got hooked. I
Yeah,
can't give it
totally.
up. Yeah,
Totally. It's just like, oh, give me more, give me more.
that was the dealer.
Like,
That was the dealer giving
yeah,
you that free taste the first time.
yeah. But and then I just kind of dove into it. And to be perfectly honest, like I've been in the right place at the right time ever since.
Yeah.
I've been extraordinarily lucky from like that moment forward, that the next opportunity led to the next one, led to the next one, led to the next one. And I know, like we talk about, you make your own luck and you have to be ready for when you get lucky, but you first and foremost have to get lucky.
Yeah, yeah. I attribute a lot of my success to luck and being in the right
Mm-hmm.
place, and just I think a lot of it too for me was gall, just having the
Yeah.
just being like, well, you should hire me for this.
Yeah.
You agree? Okay.
Well, and that's being ready for getting lucky.
Yeah,
If you're not ready to seize that moment, it might never come again.
yeah. Well, I know that like so you went from college, and then did you do like the young artist pipeline circuit, or was it?
Yeah. So I went from Luther College in Northeast Iowa to CCM.
Mhm.
I was at CCM for a couple of years, and then that
Who'd you study with there at CCM?
I was with Ken Shaw
Ken Shaw. I
at
know
CCM.
Ken.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
I was with Bill McGraw when I was there.
Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. They're both still there, both still
Yeah.
kicking. So I did that, and then I spent a summer at Santa Fe and at Glimmerglass, and those kind of helped bridge the gap. I went to Seattle back when they still had a young artist program, did 2 years there, and then because I did the Seven Deadly Sins at New York City Ballet after my first year in Seattle, and that introduced me to Ken Noda, which got me to the Met Young Artist program.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I would say I've been a free agent since
Yeah.
2015.
So you went through that Met Young Artist program, like boot
Yeah.
camp.
Yeah. But like, again, like, really lucky to be able to go right from school to these young artist programs to help set the stage, and again, I can only attribute that to being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The recent events have gotten me to think about a lot of things and examine a lot of things from my past. So I am adopted from Korea. I was adopted when I was like 5.5 months old and raised by a white family in Minnesota. So, Asian Americans will always talk about model minority, white adjacency. And I would agree, there are definitely privileges that come with that. But, because, for instance, Asian Americans don't have to worry about police in the same way that a lot of other minorities in America have to worry about police. We get that comfort, but there are still some overlapping issues that face all minorities in America. It's the microaggressions, it's the professional ceilings, that exists. And so I've always felt personally, because our plight has never been just frankly as significant or viewed as not significant, that's not, we don't really get to talk about it
Yeah.
as much. We do have some benefits, so I understand why we can't really complain about some things, but also that doesn't make these things invisible.
Yeah.
And it's been very easy, even for myself as an Asian American, to disregard the impact of a number of things in my life. Like, Asian people hate being asked, where are you from? Where are you really from? And it's just something we've always kind of tossed
Minnesota.
off. Yeah, yeah, I'm American.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
freaking citizen.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, your English is so good. Yeah, because I grew up learning it. I can't tell you the number of people, even in the business, who've been like, so Stenson, so is your mother Asian, or is your like, no, I was adopted. Oh yeah, oh, that makes
Oh,
perfect sense.
that's a
Yeah,
story I
and that's
recognize
like,
from the news. Oh, okay.
yeah,
Cool, cool.
and that's like that's the first conversation I've had with plenty of people.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, looking back on it, is in you are inherently othered.
Yeah.
You're different. You don't usually belong here.
Yeah.
Is a lot of what that says. And even if it's not explicitly that, you get that feeling from that like, you're strange. How did you come to be here? We're not used to seeing you.
For lack of a better term, and an overused term in our industry, is exotic.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I remember when I was like a first grader, one of the paraprofessionals at school, like when we had popcorn day or something, she would buy me popcorn because she thought I was a cute kid, which was, very nice and blah, blah, blah. But also looking back on it, it's like, is it just because like I'm the cute Asian kid with the round face?
Yeah.
Like you feel the need to like, oh, you're so cute. I don't see Asian babies very often, like that kind of thing. And just like, it makes you re-examine all these things moving back. And as we all know now, Minnesota is incredibly problematic. Like,
Yeah.
one thing about Minnesota is this Midwestern nice thing, which is partially a virtue and partially a huge
It's not
problem.
nice. It's
Yeah,
not nice at all.
yeah.
It's such. I mean, people go, "Oh, it's Midwestern nice." Means they're nice. No, it doesn't. It means they're being an asshole to you with a smile.
You just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
The uncomfortable things, you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
There's so much de facto segregation in the Twin Cities area that until like I had a friend that was living like in North Minneapolis, and until I went to go like visit her at her house, I did not realize that something like that existed in Minnesota, because we just never talked about it. And that there were like people basically shoved into this part of town that was ignored, that was underfunded, that just no one ever talked about. It's like, oh, it's there. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Drive
around that place.
That is a problem that Minnesota has to reckon with. Yeah. Is that the uncomfortable does exist. You can't just ignore it. And we have a community of tens of thousands of Korean adoptees in Minnesota. And fortunately, I've had friends growing up that are also Korean adoptees. So fortunately, we have had each other through all of this as well. But just kind of the ability to be ignored, or you're different, you don't fit, and we're never going to talk about it. We're just going to kind of like ignore these people and just move on. And that was going to be me had I not had desirable talents. You have to have something that people want or that they pay attention to.
Yeah.
I will say that I've been fortunate in that way too, because like I came up, I've always been self-aware about this one way or another. Like I'm under 6 feet tall, let's say, and I'm an Asian guy. Yeah. People who look like me don't have very many, if any, role models in mass media.
Right.
The Asian role models I had growing up, like on TV and movies, were like Pat Morita in Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee.
Like character. I mean, Jackie Chan did his own thing, but like character roles.
Yeah.
That was what the Asian community has been relegated to in Hollywood. Now, it's something that I know that's in the process of being changed. There's a big movement in Hollywood and in theater and in
Hmm.
musical theater and
Hmm.
whatnot. And then opera is, I think, making an attempt, but it's, I always say that opera is a great place to be at the end of the world because it'll happen 20 years later. And that's not a knock. That's just we're an old art form, and it's
you know,
it's it's a big art form, and it moves slow.
well, and it's that's a whole nother thing. And I'd love to get to that
Yeah,
after finishing this point, but like we didn't have those role models.
yeah,
It was not told to me when I was growing up that Asian men are seen as heroes and desirable people in these grand stories. There wasn't a place for that. I didn't even know who, like, I think John Cho was like the because he like made a splash as the MILF dude in American Pie was like the and then like went on to Harold and Kumar. Like that was maybe the potential Asian role model.
yeah.
So like I went into it like thinking, oh man, I should probably like just accept, or I could just like immediately run into being a character tenor,
Yeah.
and then I could just corner the market on that, and I'll sing Goro until I die. And only because I auditioned with character rep for all my auditions, and then I went to Santa Fe, and David Holloway was listening outside the door when I was coaching the Petrarch sonnets, and then he just like barges in. He's like, "You're a lyric tenor." Closes the door.
I love that kind of feedback.
Yeah, yeah,
Like just like a suicide bombing of like of advice.
yeah,
Blah! Slam.
yeah. You're a lyric tenor.
What happened? Like,
But getting that, like getting the seal of approval from the right people was what made it possible, which is gatekeeping is a complicated word, but like you need somebody who's a gatekeeper, I guess, to approve whatever path the industry wants to see you as. I've been the beneficiary and lost opportunities
yeah,
from gatekeepers, and then like because of the approval from Santa Fe and David's pushing me to continue exploring more lyric repertoire, like I auditioned for Glimmerglass for summer of 10, and I started with Frisch zum Kampfe, and I had this whole thing. I take off my shoe and wave it angrily at the people at the end. And then they asked, I had Romeo on my list, and I sang that too. And I was just like shooting for Basilio in Notze for that summer, just like to kind of like exist
yeah.
there. And then I got the call, like Don Morazzo and Michael Heaston. I never, ever, ever, ever thought that they were going to cast an Asian kid under 6 feet tall as Martin in the Tenderland, like American, meat and potatoes kind of opera. And they wanted me to sing Martin in the Tenderland. And I'm like, oh my freaking God, really? Seriously? And because of that too, on a major stage where people were going to see me as a lyric tenor, as Loverboy, that really impacted a lot of people's perception of who I was. And
I think, I mean, it seems like a lot of these the people that say, well, they'll never buy that person as X. What I think they're doing is they're really they're selling their audience super short,
yeah,
because the audience will believe. I mean, look, we sing our text, all of it, which is unbelievable, and we basically shout it in a room of 4,000 people, even the quiet stuff. So like it's a bit like it's for me, it's always been a bit strange to say they'll never buy that
yeah.
when they buy a whole lot of other nonsense that you could never believe in the first place.
Well, when I hear that too, I hear I don't want to be the first one
Yeah,
to try this. I don't want to be the first one to do this. I hear, I hear I'm scared.
yeah,
There's a certain precedent, so to speak, and I don't want to buck that and potentially have to deal with the repercussions
yeah.
of bucking tradition, which I can understand to a certain degree, but also people of all colors, shapes, sizes, etc., deal in human stories.
A lot.
Totally.
One of the narratives that I think we're only recently starting to emerge from is the idea that Asian people can't play leads. They can't play romantic. People don't see, especially Asian men, we don't see them as romantic leads. And it's
No,
something
and
that
we
a
see.
lot. Go ahead.
Sorry. and we see like Asian women as hypersexualized objects,
Yeah.
that these porcelain dolls.
This is by and large
And
an immigration narrative, right? It has a lot to do
mhm,
with anti-miscegenation laws and the immigration patterns that happened as a result of building the West and whatnot, where people weren't allowed to marry outside of their race, but everybody that was an immigrant was a man. So
mhm.
it was a very difficult place, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of that particular narrative. And it was something that I wasn't aware of, and definitely didn't teach that in school.
Mhm.
And these are things you pick up, just studying these narratives and having friends that help you educate yourself.
I guess you're right that that's what comes with ignorance.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the common story that's coming out from the Asian community, is that we just simply feel ignored.
Yeah.
We, we benefit from some things, but we don't have stories really. So it just kind of goes to, you're hard workers. You look a certain way, done. And that's how we've seen a number of our colleagues get pigeonholed into various repertoire. This is why the porgy trap exists.
Yeah.
Um, this is I was told so early in my career, like the moment you take a Goro, that's what it's going to be. So you got to be really careful about what you're accepting moving forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you?
yeah.
I mean, in your experience, like, has there ever been a moment where, in our industry, you were made hyper aware of this particular issue as related to your path and everything else?
Um, because of my fortunate circumstance early in my career in the United States, I've had leading opportunities come to me
Mm-hmm.
pretty early on, despite what my path that I was kind of shooting for was saying, even. So I've been very fortunate in that respect. The moment I went to Europe, it's like hit the reset button. You have to do a whole new round of convincing
Mm-hmm.
to people, or you have to, like, I remember on a panel with Nick Pon, we were talking about, in order for people like us to have a seat at the table, you have to go to certain extremes for them to see you as usable. So like you become usable if you're going to sing just like those insanely high stratospheric things, Italiana, stuff like that. That's where you might have a use. But anything else, it's kind of like, well, I don't know.
There's a bar of exceptionalism that you have to reach that
Yes.
I do not have to reach. That's true. Absolutely
I'll,
true.
I'll, I'll let you say that.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound good if I say it,
That's
but
true.
thank
It's
you for saying that.
absolutely true. And
But
I think it's often a misconception that once like, we're in America, we're all this is the racist country, and it's terrible for everybody, and etc. And it's by and large true. But I think people think, well, but Europe, it's so much more progressive and forward thinking. And I think I was frankly shocked when I went to Europe at some of the casual racism that's present there, which I was like, whoa, you guys do that over here too, huh? Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, it's something like as little as Choi and I were in a show somewhere in France. Not going to say any specifics.
I was in
And
France. We'll say
we
France.
were both like, and yeah, this wasn't hostile. This was just kind of lazy.
Yeah.
We were both given the exact same shade of makeup. Choi and I are very different complexion Koreans, and also, she lives in Southern California, so of course she's going to be a different. But like, I am not as dark as Choi is, but I look nice and bronzed for that show, just because it's like, oh, take that. Oh, we can use that on him too. Just like
When
little
you
things like that.
when something like that, I mean, is that another instance where you just go, well, we'll just kind of, I mean, how do you approach something like that? I don't know.
Well, sometimes in that case,
I mean, bad
communicating it
makeup
was,
is an issue in our business in
yeah.
and of itself.
In that case, communicating it was very difficult because neither of us was fluent in French. So
Uh,
that's one case where it's like, and
I mean, we have a hard time communicating with each other in our own goddamn language about racial
yeah,
issues.
yeah,
How can we do
exactly.
it?
And like, you just pick and choose your battles. Like sometimes it's something where you have to put your foot down, and it's not acceptable. And there are some times where it's like, well, this isn't really different from anywhere else, and I'm not high enough on the totem pole at this that's not a good example. Sorry, that's an outdated example. But like, I'm not high enough in the pecking order, let's say, to have attention drawn to this.
Yeah.
You know, and
I
just
mean,
kind of
it does. I mean, it does. There is an element of this that it takes people that are willing to confront these issues
yeah.
in order to be able to, because I think it rises largely out of ignorance, and I don't think it's willful ignorance. I think just people aren't aware. I myself wasn't aware until I got into the community and of our industry, and it made friends from people from across the racial, ethnic, cultural diaspora of the globe, and began to have, we in our business, we have like, sometimes a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get to know somebody. You end up, there's sort of, you sort of suspend this the rules of what's acceptable discourse and what's not acceptable discourse, just so you can actually get on that express track, create some sort of bond with another person on the stage to be able to tell this crazy story that doesn't make sense anyway. and so as a result, there's been a lot of frank discussion about these things with a lot of colleagues, and for me, that was the primary way that I was able to educate myself. It wasn't through someone sending me a link or an interesting podcast or a play or a movie on a subject. It had primarily to do with the people who I knew well telling me their stories, and in a very specific way, in a way that it applied directly to their narrative.
Yeah, we had a member of our bargaining committee brought forth some really, really great protocol with in just even engaging in conversations to broach these topics. And like, I think it was with the oopsouch protocol. Like, if you say something that offends, whether or not you meant it to, but if you feel impacted, you say ouch, and then the person who said that acknowledges and says oops.
I like that.
And it's like, yeah, that automatically kind of like just took the high stakes, because a lot out of it, like a lot of white people I know, like, they don't want to engage in the conversation because they don't want to offend anyone, which I totally get. And there are ways to kind of set the stage so that you can have a frank conversation, that people aren't going to be crucified for their ignorant mistakes, so that we can get to a point of greater understanding.
Yeah. And it's the word, I think the word microaggression sometimes is the wrong word, because it makes it sound like it's minimized somehow. But they have this cumulative effect that can really, I mean, like, it can give you sort of a sense of PTSD after a while, where you're just like, again with this stuff. It's like little things like, somebody may say, well, hey, I'm a white guy and I've had to wear makeup that's darker than my skin. What's the big deal? Well, your skin's never been an issue.
Yeah.
No one's ever not hired you because of your skin. So
yeah.
That's a very, important issue for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when people like are painting like my eyelid fold or something, or putting highlighter on my eyelid fold. It's like, you're not going to see that, right? Like, you don't need to pull this up and then like spend 15 minutes just jamming it in there, only for me to have to like dig in there and remove it afterwards. Like, we don't have to do that. That's like, like some people are like, well, I always do the top lid, like, and then some people are like, oh, didn't think of that. Okay, moving on.
Makes sense. Done.
Yeah. It's just things like that. But like, exactly like what you were saying, it compounds over time. And what a lot of Asian people, I think, have realized in all of this is that you open your eyes, so to speak, and then you realize that your world is completely formed by a series of microaggressions, let's call them, that you've known your entire life. That I know I should never even joke about how an Asian person talks in rehearsal, because that will kick open the door for everyone to think that it's okay to give their best Asian accent. Oof. That kind of thing. Yeah. That and just that you brace yourself going into certain situations. I remember at a Walmart in upstate New York, like, I was checking out, and the cashier was giving me that look. Sometimes there's a look, and she's like, now you're Asian, right? And I'm like, oh, here we go. Yep. Because I had a question about green tea. Is it really as good for you as people say it is? and like constantly having to represent everything in, Pan Asian.
That is the
Uh,
thing. I think that the idea to a white person that all white people are the same. They'll correct you pretty quick. Well, I'm Irish, or I'm
mhm,
Scottish, or I'm my favorite is I'm 1% Native American. No, you're
mhm,
not. It's no, you're not. So the idea that in my in the white community that there's just the Asian monolith and
mhm,
it's all the same, and it's outrageous and completely inaccurate.
mhm.
It's a thing that's really prevalent in our community.
And it's a really tough position because we are all kind of being lumped into the same box, that Eastern Asian people look enough alike
Hmm.
that we can kind of play each other, but we're not at the point, in my opinion, where we can kind of start drawing more of the lines when
Yeah,
we're still all lumped together as one.
yeah,
And we need to see more representation of yellow people, period,
yeah,
that's a little more reflective of the population and demographics of the United States and the major cities
yeah.
that are in it, before we can start arguing about our really specific representation. Because I do think that the progress for a Korean person will be progress for a Chinese person, which will be progress for a Japanese person, and
We tend to like.
progress for a Vietnamese person, et cetera, et cetera. Like, when we see people who look like us, even vaguely looking like us, um, that they can be the hero, that they can be a complex, strong woman, that they can be more than just a porcelain doll, or like like the slimy marriage broker.
Or they or
Then
the mystical Asian.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
this, they
like
had the wisdom. What
the
wisdom?
yeah,
The
yeah,
wisdom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. When we can be seen more as just tropes, which is why I think like Minari was such an incredible film, for instance, especially that the grandmother, like this person who is such like a universal character. We all know somebody like that, even if like some of the idiosyncrasies are a little bit different. Everyone knows somebody like that. And despite even a language barrier for an English speaker, so much personality and love and tenderness and stubbornness and shame and all of these things are so crystal clear, despite us not speaking the same language.
Yeah.
That and that the fact that she doesn't look like a lot of white people, for instance, who have seen the movie and can still impact so powerfully, that humanity is the universal thing that links us, and there are these walls up that don't need to be there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the issues with that you were speaking about conflating different Asian cultures, and one of the things that was brought to my attention early on was like when you make a mistake about someone's Asian identity, whether it's with their culture or their country of origin, what you don't understand is that can be incredibly offensive to these people, not just because you're saying all Asians are the same. That's offensive in and of itself. But sometimes you're conflating two cultures that have been engaged in bloody wars.
Yeah.
And there's a conflict that's inherent between those two cultures that you're just blatantly ignoring, and it's can be extremely hurtful in those cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Well, you're gonna like. I know that coming up now, you're on the negotiation committee for the union for one of the companies, which has been an incredible thing, and I understand how much work that is because I've seen how much work Megan puts in. And it's like a
Yeah.
full time job
And she's a champion.
that you
She's
do
an
for free.
absolute
It's
champion.
a full time job you do for free. And one of the places that we can work for change, one of the only places where we as a singing community or as the people that are on the stage and sometimes back behind the stage and directing, but one of the only places we can actually get together and collectively have our voice heard is in the union. And I understand that you have thrown your hat in the ring for the AGMA Board of Governors. What made you make that choice? Because I mean, you are putting yourself up there on the firing line, man. And I know that that's not a decision you made lightly. So what factored into that decision?
To be perfectly frank with you, it's Meg's leadership that got me on board. Um, Meg is the kind of leader that I want to work with. Um, she's intelligent. Our both of our leadership styles, for instance, contrast each other's and complement each other's very well as well. Like I like to think really big picture, kind of like this equals this plus this plus this plus this will lead to this down the line. Like that's kind of how my brain goes, and I will forget a lot of kind of like the immediate details or like the human factor sometimes in the grand equation. And Meg is so good about making sure all those loose ends are taken care of.
Yeah.
You know, she's a wonderful, beloved person, and that's also the kind of who has the best interests of everyone in mind and is remarkably intelligent and practical. There's not ego there. It's somebody who's willing to listen, who wants to take all the best information and then make a decision based on that,
Yeah.
not just because, gut feeling, that kind of crap. Like that's the kind of person I want to work with, who I only feel is the kind of person that can bring about like necessary change.
Get
And
the being her husband. One of the things I've noticed about her is that when she comes into any given sort of discussion, her agenda isn't pre-written.
Mhm.
It's her agenda becomes the agenda of everybody, and
Yeah.
she's literally trying to assemble the agenda. She has,
Mhm.
of course, precepts and convictions and stuff that she holds dear.
Mhm.
Being an Italian American, the whole union thing is a very big part of her who she is. But she definitely, like, the point for her is whenever she enters these discussions is to take the body of what people are trying to say and try to come up with a narrative and an idea and some goals that satisfy everybody's desires.
Mhm. And that's the kind of person that I want to work with, and the only kind of person in my own small personal opinion that I think can bring about substantial change
Yeah.
over a
So
period of time.
as you're working on the campaign, and it's an AGMA election, so it's not like
Mhm.
it's not like the governor of Texas or something. What are some of the things that have really stuck in your sort of political craw about our industry that you would like to see changed in our union and with respect to our entire industry?
I mean, making sure that soloists are a part of the table now, that our input is being taken into consideration when crafting policy and in negotiations. But also something that, it's been really nice returning to Seattle because I really grew up here,
Hmm.
and I made really fantastic bonds with, production, the chorus, everyone at this company. And it feels like a family
Yeah.
to me. And seeing the wonderful things that we can do together, um that's something that's always stuck with me, and the magic that can come and the art and the great work and all of that can come from building that community and making sure that everyone in that community feels valued and represented, um where it doesn't feel like work at all. It's endless fun.
Yeah.
And to try to be able to do things to make that environment that's worth anything. And that's what I want to help achieve, and be able to help achieve it for those people who I care about so much.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with creating. I understand the adversarial relationship that unions in general have with management.
Mhm.
Just when you study union politics or you read books about union movements and stuff, there's been, in America, there's been terrible, people have died
Mhm.
to give us the kind of rights that we have as workers in this country, which are constantly being eroded. But there's a different, when you're talking about the workers in Alabama who were trying to unionize and were ultimately defeated by Amazon, and what Amazon does as a for-profit company, that where everything's about the bottom line. There's a different approach when you're looking at an opera company, who is who rarely, if ever, is in the black. They're always in the red
Mhm.
because it's a losing. What we do is a losing proposition financially. Always, we rely on donors to give us money to be able to do what we do.
Mhm.
So, how does that affect the kind of approach that you'd like to see the union take with companies, or how you see that relationship playing out?
So moving forward in like the financials of opera, um, there's going to have to be, unfortunately, there's going to have to be sacrifice on all parts, but we're going to have to start thinking long term. It's not just going to be, yes, our current donor pool is going to be incredibly important to help us get through this. And they should have, their seat at the table because of it.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, there is a large untapped market, and I think Dallas Opera, the Facebook post that David made has proven this unequivocally, that representation-oriented media is an untapped, like gives you an untapped audience. That there is lots of engagement that comes from representation-oriented media.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of money in representation-oriented media, as we've seen, in Hollywood and in theater, straight with Broadway and whatnot. The scores of people, white and of color, that are coming and spending money on representation-oriented media, and that's an audience and money that we do not tap into. Period.
Yeah.
In opera, and that is something that's just waiting.
Well, I know that, for instance, when Houston did their mariachi opera,
Mm-hmm.
the name of the piece is God, it's escaping me now, but they sold out, man. They
Mm-hmm.
sold out,
Mm-hmm.
and the audience didn't look like their typical opera
Mm-hmm.
audience. And I think they learned some lessons there. And I think a lot of companies saw that because when you see, I know that when I go, this is just, I mean, it's maybe an overly simple example, but when I went and saw Dead Man Walking, when I saw Southern culture being represented on the opera stage, I got excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
When I go see
Totally.
Susanna, there's something, or like the Tenderland,
Mm-hmm.
these pieces speak to me in a different way, and I feel sort of, there are things I would just ignore just to be
Mm-hmm.
able to see those pieces, and my suspension of disbelief is much easier to suspend when I can see my own stories being told on stage,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's something that I think people just aren't aware of, that's even happening to them while they're watching something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is not a big leap.
Italian opera.
Yeah, I mean
That's,
exactly.
yeah.
I mean,
It's
people
those.
come, they like, oh yeah, this is my ancestors' music. I'm gonna come. You go to Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or New York City, man, you see it there.
Yeah. I mean, like I sang Nessun Dorma at a wedding. Like what she knew it was like about a princess,
Yeah,
and just like tears. And there was a string quartet that was like at one point like playing La Donna Mobile, and like her brother like stopped and was like, yes, yes. And it's like, dude, you know what this is about, right? But like it doesn't even matter because it's part of your culture and representation, and you remember like your grandfather weeping listening to the Met broadcasts on the radio, that kind of thing. It's a slice of home. Even like when you're talking about American opera and that, I'm from the Midwest in the heartland, and like the Tenderland hits me right there.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, even being a yellow kid from Minnesota, like that's still where I grew up. And yeah, getting that. I remember, gosh, when I was involved in Dream of the Red Chamber at San Francisco Opera, and like on opening night, the scores of Chinese people and Chinese money that came out for that,
Mm-hmm.
but also the Sylvia Chang, I think, who's the like basically the godmother of Chinese cuisine in America, and her son like went on to found P.F. Chang's
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. But she was there, and like I'd known of her because I watched the documentary Search for General Tso, which kind of like yeah, but like and how important this woman was, like to create Chinese food as like that banquet style fine dining in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And she's royalty there. I saw like young Asian people, like Asian millennials, like coming up to her to get their picture taken with her
Mm-hmm.
at opening night. And like this is a whole community, and there is money there
Yeah.
that wants to experience these kinds of things that we have not tapped into yet, because it's oriented towards other people, or it's become it still has this idea, like this notion of exclusivity.
Yeah.
And we're going to need that
Yeah.
to move forward.
I mean, I'm a big, this is the drum I beat all the time about exclusivity and the ivory tower and the overly academic nature of sometimes what we do. And it's like, if we make people feel when they walk into the opera house like they don't belong, if we have all these culture, these traditions and sort of bottlenecks that we have to pass through in order to even be in the building, you got to wear a suit. When we dispense with all that stuff and let people just feel comfortable being who they are, I always say, people ask me, what do I wear to the opera? I say, you wear whatever you want to wear to the opera.
Yeah, totally.
And if anybody gives you any shit, you let me know and I'll give them
Yeah.
shit. Because I don't care what anybody's wearing, as long as they're sitting in that seat, man.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's not a lack of respect that they have. I'm just glad they're there.
Yeah.
All the respect they need is buying the ticket, and I'm happy.
Yeah. Showing up, even. Yeah. I guess what was I gonna say? I lost my thought.
Sorry, we can edit that out.
But whatever. Yeah, just representation is so important. Actually, oh yes, feeling welcome. When you are not used, growing up, I would not see many people that looked like me.
Yeah.
And it was always jarring for me to be in an environment like, because there are tens of thousands of Korean adoptees in Minnesota, there are these culture day camps. So we can kind of, learn about Korean culture. For me, most importantly, eat Korean food and, just be around people that look like you and share your experience, even as children. And being able to, if I could walk into an opera house and see a bunch of people that looked like me and sit amongst a bunch of people that looked like me, automatically that makes me feel welcome.
Yeah.
Especially when that is not the case most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, why representation matters. We want to show up to see and support people who look like us. And in turn, that will build that community, that will build that engagement. When the numbers are going up, like I keep saying, like if Asian people can get Aquafina to come to an opera or retweet some of our content or something, like that is going to be a huge step moving forward. Looking at the Crazy Rich Asians media campaign and how they, as a unit, when somebody did something, every single person involved screamed it from the rooftops.
Yeah. Anyone's
achievement was amplified 20-fold because of that. That was part of the story. And that's something that brought hundreds of millions of dollars in box office sales to that show. That's what's waiting out there. That's the potential.
Do you think that one of the pathways to this is when we think of opera on Asian subjects, instead of thinking of pieces like Madame Butterfly or Turandot or whatever that's in the standard repertoire, that new stories, I mean, maybe new stories about old stories, but new stories that with new composers and new music is one of the ways that we can help sort of educate people on I mean, when you look at, the great operas, there's always this sense of struggle. Mm-hmm. There's many times they've used historical narratives about oppressed people and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So do you think that it'd be a good move for opera companies to start really exploring the subject matter that I mean, it's an entire panoply of stories that are out there that just aren't told. And and I don't even mean within an American context. I mean, we can go on. There's plenty of stories to tell there. Mm-hmm. But just even, we love to tell historical stories. There's a ton of stories. Like the most badass pirate that ever fucking walked on the earth was a lady from Asia. And it
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
that is kick ass. I mean, those are great stories to tell. Do you think that's a pathway forward for us to sort of engage communities in a better way?
So two things. Like I was fortunate enough to be a part of this show, An American Soldier, that we did at Washington and Opera Theater St.
Hmm.
Louis. And the thing that really became clear to me over the course of being involved with that film, it's about Private Danny Chen, a soldier who commits suicide in Afghanistan as a result of institutionalized racism and bullying and maltreatment, and people were held accountable for that. Probably not held accountable enough, but they were held somewhat accountable
Hmm.
for that. Um, that the thing that really spoke to me, especially with my own experience, and I think for the other Asian people involved in the production as well, is that yes, this is an Asian story, but this is also just a fundamentally American story. It's a kid who was born here, grew up in Chinatown. He wanted to serve his community and he wanted to serve his country. And somebody said, I don't think you should be able to, just because of the way that you look, or you're not fit to do this. You're not equal to us to serve this country like we all want to do, just because you look different.
Yeah.
And I think people of every walk of life could easily say, how dare you? How dare you tell an American you're you because you're different, you shouldn't be able to serve your country, that you shouldn't be able to try to help people. How freaking dare you?
I mean, it is an amazing conflation of two things, because you have uh, the veteran community,
Mm-hmm.
which is untouchable
Mm-hmm.
in our country. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, literally untouchable. Only like recently have there been some sort of like insights into like, hey, there's a white supremacy problem in our military. We got to work on that. But you still have to be very careful when you do any veterans. You get one detail wrong. I've done many operas on veteran subjects. You
Mm-hmm.
get a
Mm-hmm.
medal wrong,
Yep.
you will get a stream of just how dare you, and the people are
Mm-hmm.
incensed.
Yep.
So I think it's I think a very it's an incredible proposition to put a disenfranchised community
Mm-hmm.
and wrap that into the military. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a true story.
Mm-hmm.
So when you shine a light on that story, I mean, you're really shining a light on some things that you just can't get with a standard opera. You
Mm-hmm.
got to these stories are so rich.
And it's a rare intersection of a story of an Asian person in America and a fundamentally American story,
Yeah.
and how it starts to blur the lines that we do have a lot in common in a lot of ways. Yes, there are differences, but the things that link us together too are unbelievably strong. And that's where we can find humanity in each other and a greater understanding. And we can simply, broach the subject, that it's a human desire to want to help people
Yeah.
and make the world a better place and make your community a safer place.
And it's also a different
Yep.
way. Whenever you start looking at your art, which I can tell just by talking to you, that whenever you do what you do with your life, your music and your acting and your storytelling, I don't think that you're just doing it for money. You're doing it. You have another motivation. It's to create more empathy, and it's that deeper meaning creates deeper art.
Yep. Yep. And that's when it's the most rewarding. That's when it's not work. It's you feel like you're doing you feel like you are doing what you're supposed to be
It
doing.
feels like a service.
Yep.
We all want our art. We all want what we do to be more than just entertainment for rich people. I mean, I'm sure. I think in the '80s and '90s, that was probably the primary reason for doing this, because there was a lot of money in it back then.
But the
if you're an
fees have
opera
remained
singer
largely
20
unchanged
yeah.
for 40 years.
Yeah. If you're working in an opera as an opera singer in 2021, well, you definitely ain't doing it for the money, because there ain't
No,
none in it right now.
no. I want to say one other thing, going back off to more standard repertoire, that, conscious casting sometimes of people of color, you get additional storytelling let's call it storytelling bonuses, or you gain extra ground by simply casting people of color in traditionally Caucasian roles. Let's say I will be eternally grateful to Francesca for giving me the opportunity to do Candide, and what I know was on her mind and was very clear to me when I got into rehearsal is that normally, like, when you do an opera that's in a different world or a different time period, you need to spend time and devote time and real estate to creating a world.
Yeah.
And like acclimating your audience to this is the context of everything. And when you put a good-natured Midwestern short Asian kid amongst a cast of tall white people, that person on stage is automatically seen as other.
Yeah.
And when Candide is definitely an other and constantly an other in every situation that he's in that show, you get so much storytelling from the moment I turn around and look at the audience without ever needing to set that up. You just automatically know. There are so many other contexts in which a person of color can retell a tired old story just by their mere existence as a person. That maybe some people see it, maybe some won't, but it can add such incredible layers without ever having to devote any time to establishing that.
I think that's a really important point. That doing this kind of casting isn't a subtraction.
No, you can actually get massive gains from it.
Yeah. This isn't us being like, well, we'll throw them a bone. No.
Yeah.
No, that's this. This is everyone's going to win here.
Yeah. Yeah, we can tell a story greater this way. And there's the problem with potential tokenization, but the fact remains that you can tell a story in different and greater ways by just having someone exist as someone. And, with my own personal experience as a Midwesterner, Minnesotan, having kind of like really overly optimistic view of life, and then kind of getting, your hard knocks as you go along, that was really important for me also in Candide to find by the end, after getting kicked down over and over and over again, and seeing your kind of perfect concept of the world be shattered over and over again. In a way also like it feeling different because I look different than everyone else. Finding a way to find value in life and yourself and to be able to move on from all of that was unbelievably valuable. And going back to, where it feels like you're doing a service, it's doing a service to myself, but hopefully it's doing a service to others. That, in an unfair world, sometimes the thing that makes it worth living is other people to have to struggle with.
That's beautiful, man. And with that, I think we'll conclude, because that's just the best. That's the best end of I can imagine. Because I want to appreciate. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk. I know these are
my pleasure.
Easy issues to talk about, and there's always sort of an inherent, I think, stress about engaging in this conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you, putting that aside and speaking so candidly today. And as far as somebody whose motivation is service, that much is very clear from you. Anybody who would volunteer to put themselves in between a company and the people that work at it must have some kind of either they're a masochist or they're a saint. It's one of those things. But I tend to think that you're the latter. So I really appreciate you giving of yourself in that way. And I hope that people, you're running for the West Coast representative, right? And Seattle?
At large, yes, Northwest at large.
Okay, so I thought anybody that's out there that can vote for Andrew Stenson in this role, you will be well served in doing so. All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Mike. You're the man. Yeah. Really appreciate this.
Right on, brother. It'll be out next week, or it'll be out tonight. So.
Tonight.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, man.
Peace. Bye.